Hey there. For beginning, myself and Paul just want to remind you that everything discussed here isn't a substitute for formal investment advice and does not represent the formal perspectives of Aquarium Investments. The content of discussion will hopefully interest you, entertain, and supplement your own perspective, but it's important that you conduct your own research or speak formally to a financial advisor before taking any risk with your money. Having said all that, we hope you enjoy the discussion and let's dive in. Hello, Paul. Good to talk to you again today. How are you?
Hello, Cormac. I'm fine. Great to talk to you again. It's our fifth time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Our fifth time. We're heading back into it again. Going to be discussing things going on in the world.
Yes.
And, there's always so much going on.
Yeah, this one is going to be kind of global, right?
Yeah, I guess so. We're going to talk a bit about the topic of Brics, which, in case anyone's worried, we're not pivoting into construction or housing or anything like related to bricks and construction.
Not yet.
It's actually not yet, until maybe if this doesn't work out, we can pivot into that kind of topic, and that'll be our future. But no, it's going to be about BRICS, the BRICS entity, which is the counter to the G7. And BRICS, of course, stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And that's kind of the counter to a lot of what's going on in the West. So we think it's a kind of interesting topic to talk about, given everything going on with America and Europe and so on. So yeah, we're going to talk about BRICS today and see how they're doing and what they're planning and the geopolitical landscape, I guess is what you could call it. So yeah, looking forward to this. So we always do our catch up on what we think are the big changes since the last time we've talked. And do you want to lead that, Paul? What do you think are the big things, the news items that have come up since we've last had our podcast? By the way, today, of course, is 14th of July, 2025. So we're about 2 months on from our last recording. So there's obviously lots of things that have been happening. So what are your thoughts? What are the big things?
Yeah, too many things have been happening. It's sometimes difficult to keep track. One day it's one thing, the next day it's quite the opposite. So I think we should stick to two events going forward. So both of us could pick one. And for me, I guess the one big beautiful bill is the big one. Because it's been discussed for a long time, and I think you have to kind of talk about tariffs in the same vein, because these topics are clearly overlapping. The bill is about spending and borrowing, and tariffs are about revenue generation, so you kind of have to look at both. So this is my pick. What about you, Cormac? Which event did it for you in this period?
Which event did it for me? Well, I think you're absolutely right. For one, it just seems like everything is at breakneck speed all the time, and we'll get into talking, of course, about US as is inevitable, and how Mr. Trump is switching a lot of things around, and there's a lot of back and forth. But probably the biggest thing that's happened for me in the past 2 months, it has to be this escalation in the Middle East. Especially this 12-day war between Iran and Israel. A lot of the conflict in the Middle East has kind of been shadowed, I guess, by the rising tensions there, and that's had a knock-on effect on a lot of things, logistics and prices and so on. And also ties in nicely, I think, with our topic today, which is BRICS, seeing as Iran, I'm not sure if they're formally in BRICS, but they're certainly tied in with China and so on. So kind of nice little overlap there as well. So that's my big topic, the Middle East escalations. So do you want to develop on your topic first?
Yeah, sure. So the one big beautiful bill, I mean, I have a hard time pronouncing it even. It just sounds bizarre. I mean, why would you call it that? It just sounds not professional to me.
Well, I mean, like all things with Mr. Trump, it's a lot of pageantry and a lot of big names, right? So if it catches the eye, I guess that's a win in his eyes.
everything is a TV ad, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, the one big beautiful bill was passed, and it passed just marginally through what is called the process of reconciliation, so just barely. So I guess the biggest thing is that debt ceiling is being raised by 5 trillion. So this 5 trillion will be issued. So more printing, more money in the system. I think it's important to understand that tax cuts are front-loaded, so they come in the first couple of years, and then expenditure cuts are backloaded, so they're way out there. And I guess the next administration will have to deal with it later on. I think it's important to point out that Musk is out and Doge is not talked about at all anymore. So any idea of cutting expenses seems stretched at this point. I think it's just not there.
And just to give you credit on that, Paul, I know when we were talking before about Elon Musk and Doge and the expectations he had in terms of cuts, I think he was estimating between 250 billion to 500 billion, and I even think Howard Lutnick was saying higher. And I know at the time you had a lot of skepticism to that. On the website, the Doge website is still established there, and one of the big problems in the US is the spending, especially central spending and big government spending. So when you go on the website, there is a lot of stuff about how they try to cut all that, but a lot of the cuts they've done are related to cancelling contracts that were pre-planned. They weren't necessarily cut. And if you listen to Musk, he was saying, we've cut tons, but then when you look at the website, it's actually, that they've just cancelled a lot of contracts that hadn't even been paid or weren't even going out. So the actual amount saved, I think, is in around 10 billion or something like that, from what I can figure out. It's even a little bit hard to determine if that's true or not. But to give credit to you, you had a bit of skepticism on that, and I think you called it right. I think that Musk, from what I noticed, has an awful habit of overpromising and then under-delivering. And sometimes he knocks it out of the park, but sometimes he promises way too much, and it doesn't work. So
yeah, thank you. But I wish I was wrong on this one, because I actually think that spending cuts is what is needed. And I actually think that in the end, they'll have to do them anyway. What they cut, I don't know, but it seems unsustainable, and they keep talking about it. So I think the key issue is that this administration seems to have forgotten about their attempts to rein in spending, because for a few months it was all about spending cuts. Musk was there talking a lot and promising a lot, as you say. But now both Trump and Bessent, they keep talking about how they will grow out of the debt problem. And as you know, for me, it was always the only mathematically feasible solution to the debt problem from the start. So, and I think it's the only realistic plan, really.
Seems like I'm a little bit of a little bit of inevitability, but certainly a risk as well, because obviously if they don't succeed, or something gets blocked, or something doesn't work, then they're in hot water. And if this administration was the one talking the most about cutting and reducing spending in the US, and they can't do it, you'd have to fear what's going to happen in the future if there's another administration. So yeah, it's spooky.
I think we've mentioned in the first or second episode how unproductive the debt issuance has been during Biden years. And I don't see it being productive in Trump's era. I think it will be unproductive because cutting spending is just very, very difficult, I think.
And then as well, at least they're acknowledging it, because I think there's been a few years of politics where spending has just continued and things haven't been reduced, whereas this admin seemed to really be fixated on this, and it's at least put a bit of a bullseye on the topic, which is necessary. So at least even if they're making a ham fist of it, they've put a bullseye on the target, as I said.
Yeah, at least they have a target. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I agree. You can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge the problem.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah. But coming on to tariffs, it's still chaos. So nothing changed in that respect. It's still one day it's one thing, the other day is another thing. I think Trump has just announced some new tariffs on Russia because of the Ukrainian war just today. Deadlines are not deadlines. We had the 7th of July, August, so a 90-day kind of pause when countries had to come to the administration and beg them to reduce tariffs. So that passed, no deals. Now it's August the 1st. And it's like literally Trump said August 1st deadline is firm, but quite not 100% certain. So, for me as a market practitioner, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what to do with this information. It's like a zero, I can't
Yeah.
trust it. It doesn't make any sense.
This might maybe potentially happen.
It might.
Outside chance. Outside maybe potentially could very well happen. I mean that's pretty concrete info, Paul. I don't know what your problem is. Like you
Yeah.
can't trade off that kind of
You
concrete
can't.
info. I don't know what you're
Well,
doing.
you can trade against it. You like if everything keeps being postponed, you just trade against it. You believe that it won't happen, right? And there will be some sort of reversal. And I think that's kind of like the markets have been interpreting this, because like these new tariffs, they didn't lead to a drop in the markets, in the equity markets, as we shall see. But the point is, it keeps changing, it keeps revolving, and it seems to be the strategy, just confuse everyone kind of thing. He seems to use tariffs as some sort of weapon, or at least he thinks it's a weapon. And I mean, it's clear that it's seen as a weapon towards Brics countries that we are going to discuss. In particular, he literally said, we are putting tariffs on these countries because they're evil, they want to defeat us, and because Brazilian President Lula, he he called Trump an emperor, and I think that pissed Trump off. So 50%, there you go, kind of thing, which is ridiculous. It's very childish. I think it's important to understand that while some tariffs are being collected, and you can see it from customs data in the US, so maybe 15, 20 billion per month as it is now. You can project it, you can annualize it, I guess. But I think it's critical to understand that someone has to pay this money. And there are only three options, really. So it could be the exporting countries that could lower prices for their products a little bit, but they will never go below their cost because it just doesn't make sense to sell at a loss, right? It could be importers, which are US businesses. So effectively, it becomes a tax on corporations that are in the import-export business. And then it's the consumer, the local US consumer, that will have to pay a higher price because, hikes are inevitable for certain goods, at least. I guess it's all three that pay these tariffs in one form or another. But it is a tax. No matter how you look at it, whoever pays it, it's a tax. It's nothing to do with free markets, market economy. It's literally not allowing the power of markets to work, which is bad. In my view, I don't think it works long term. I don't think it should be the basis of sound economy, because it just leads to less competition. And you need competition for things to evolve. But we'll see, right? I guess another thing I could mention on this is that there seems to be, at least in my mind, I think there are clear indications that there was a lot of front running of these tariff hikes. You can see it in the import data. You can see the spike of imports to US in the first quarter of this year, and then a steep decline when some of the tariffs came in. So a lot of front running by US businesses. It means that we're likely to see some impact in third or fourth quarter of this year because of the lag, because the goods in US are still being sold at lower prices despite the tariffs, right? Because of the front running. And, with this new deadline of August the 1st, you have to wonder if it's a way to get US businesses to front run increases again. I mean, maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's the idea. You kind of give your businesses a period when they have to buy, and then they rush out and buy more at cheaper prices. And then you do another delay and blah, blah, blah. But it's just, I think it just leads to uncertainty in the end. So I guess I'm not a fan, as you can probably tell, Cormac.
I can tell, Paul. I think that comes across.
I did my job then.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair enough. I think there's a lot of skepticism, and you aren't alone there.
I'm not alone for sure. So, what about the Middle East stuff? What do you think? What are the implications?
Well, I mean, obviously, this Iran is Israel 12-day conflict that took place. I mentioned earlier that it's been at the background, I guess, of a lot of the conflict in the Middle East in the last several years, and particularly, without getting into the politics of it, but the Gaza-Israel stuff as well, there's a little bit of a background there with Iran potentially funding different agencies and different organizations. But it's also a proxy for this China and Brics angle versus the West. And the biggest impact seemed to be logistics were slowed down, particularly because of the Houthis in the Red Sea, and USA and Donald Trump, of course, they were trying to slow down these Houthis and attack their ships and so on, and a number of commercial ships were sunk, and logistics were slowed down there as well. And then obviously there's also the oil element as well. I believe oil prices were kind of a bit up and down as a result of the conflict there, and I know things have settled down there again, obviously, because this 12-day war ended. But yeah, there was a lot of instability there. It was quite interesting. I think it has a nice tie into BRICS, as I'm mentioning, because Iran is in BRICS, and Russia is in BRICS, and China are in BRICS, and I know China were quietly funding Iran with anti-air equipment as well, and I think Russia, a lot of the Iranian military equipment is Russian made as well. So it is a pivot point, the whole Iran versus Israel element, and obviously Israel is heavily backed by the West and the US in particular. So quite interesting topic, I guess, just in the overall arcing topic of BRICS. So I think that was quite consequential to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on what happened there and how things moved.
Well, I do have some thoughts, but I don't think we'll be able to stay off politics if I voice them, right? But yeah, it's the links between Russia, Iran, and China are obvious. They're there. I'm not sure who's helping who, and what kind of equipment is being sold or delivered or whatever. But I think what you mentioned about logistics is very important, because we'll look at some maps later on, and I think it's pretty clear that BRICS is all about trade and logistics. Like, that's the foundation of it.
Yeah. Okay, so that sounds good. I think it'd be no harm. We could move on to an overview of our market assets from last time, if you're interested in doing that. We do obviously our section where, Paul, you review how things have moved in terms of the markets, such as US dollars or interest rates, gold, and etc. So would you be up for taking that on?
Yes, I would love to do this.
Great. Please do.
After all, it's my area of expertise, right? Not geopolitics
Exactly.
or military things. So let's start off with the dollar index as always. We've added small arrows that show you the actual percentage change from the day that we recorded last time. And you can see that the dollar hasn't moved much. It's maybe down a little bit more than 1% as of now. It was lower, but not by much. So lower, but not extreme. Gold against dollar, very similar, small move higher overall, but you can see how choppy it was. We mentioned last time that it was quite likely that gold would enter some sort of consolidation period, and I guess we were right. It's kind of stuck in this 3,000 to 3,500 range. I've added two more charts which I think are very interesting. One is the silver against dollar, which is the next chart, and it had a massive rally since the last time we talked, so almost 16% higher.
What's driving that?
Personally, I think silver is just catching up to gold, as well as other metals. We'll look at another one. We can actually look at it straight away. So copper, right? So similar gains since we last talked, 15% higher. I think they're just catching up, because if you think about it, and if you believe that the reason for gold's rally is the increase in the monetary base and the upcoming money emission, then it's basically paper in terms of currencies against physical assets like gold or silver. And it really doesn't make sense for gold to be here and for silver to be way, way lower in percentage terms. So I think that's a big part of both silver and copper. They're just catching up. But there are also other reasons. There are reasons of deficits, more and more usage of all this stuff. Well, especially with copper, I would say, because obviously copper is a big deal for construction. It's electricity basically, and as we use more and more energy, all these electricity grids need to be upgraded, and you need copper for that basically. So I think it's catch up, but also some nuances in the way supply and demand works. Okay, so S&P 500 and Nasdaq noticeably higher than the last time we talked, so around 4% higher, both of them. It looks nice, but if you think in terms of beginning of the year, like year-to-date results, it was still kind of around 5-6% on both indices, so not a big deal, I would say, but higher. And the market seems to stop reacting to Trump and his, tariffs or what have you.
Yeah, that's actually a big point that I've been noticing as well, that all the volatility that we've been getting with this US administration and Donald Trump, it initially had like a lot of swings and had a lot of effects on people's expectations, and the market reflected that. But it seems now that people are actually just calming down, and they're saying, oh well, this release that they're having about some topic, or some tweet that he puts out about some topic, is not having the same volatility anymore. It's just people are saying, oh, it's another day at the office, so we'll keep on going, which is an interesting thing behaviorally even to observe.
It's something you would expect though, right?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Like you can't, it's very difficult for humans to stay in this state of chaos. We're not used to that as, beings.
No, it's incredibly reactionary, like otherwise, and impossible. Again, it's just snip, snap, snip, snap, and that's exhausting. It's exhausting. It's for everything, for everyone. It's exhausting. So you stop reacting.
Exactly. I would say the U.S. stock market is still very, very pricey. It's like the valuations are still, we've covered them, I think, in the third episode. So it's worse than that now because we're higher, and we don't really see the bottom line improving that much to justify this. So, I guess it's the expectations of the soft landing or whatever you want to call it. Maybe AI being very productive, maybe faith in this administration or something, but it feels very speculative at the moment. So, some words of caution there. Okay, emerging market stocks also higher alongside American indices, so good for us again. WTI, well, this one is interesting, right? You can see the spike as the 12-day war happened, and then a quick rollback once, the war was won, quote, quote, or lost. I'm not sure what happened, but like the hostilities stopped. But WTI oil is still higher since the last time we talked, quite significantly, almost 10%, right? 9.2, I think. So something is on. Again, you could think of the ratio of gold to oil, which is out of sync historically. So maybe some catching up there. So US rates curve, to be honest, nothing has really changed that much. So the biggest change is maybe like 10 basis points, so 0.1% really. So we're in the same place, and it must be annoying Trump and Besant a lot because their financing needs are still there. They still need to roll over. With the debt ceiling raised, they can issue more debt now. They couldn't before. It was a big issue. But Besant said that they're not going to issue long-term debt because the rates are so high.
And the mean tweets that Donald Trump is doing isn't really having an effect on Powell. So things stay high.
No. Well, actually, it's like, he's been very nasty to Powell. Again, not very diplomatic, if you ask me. Even if Powell is gone tomorrow and he's replaced, say, with someone who is happy to cut rates instantly, just as a thought experiment, what's going to happen, right? And the Fed really controls the very short-term rate, the today's rate, or maybe up to 1 year or something like that. But the longer it goes out, the more market forces price it, basically. So without actual purchases or sales at that maturity, it doesn't really solve anything, because you would have a situation where the short-term rate is very low, but the longer-term rate might not get repriced because there's just no demand. That's a problem. And I think that could be the big issue when they cut rates, because the expectation is we cut rates, the whole of the curve goes down, and off we go. But if it doesn't happen, then they're stuck in this refinancing loophole on the short end forever. And another expectation is that this reduction in short-term rates should lead to equity gains, like equity market gains. But as we see, the rates are staying high, but the equity market is not going down, right? So it might not work the way they expect it to. And for me, it's one of the more interesting things. Like if they cut rates, if they do QE, or, the stablecoin stuff works, and, there's some demand for treasuries. Well, if it doesn't reprice the curve, then it's a big problem. And I think that's the gist of it, because obviously as this 9 trillion of refinancing comes in, your interest expense is going to go up substantially. And in terms of all this big, beautiful bill and Doge and all this, you really want it to go down, not up. The way it looks now, it's going up. So
yeah, it's very much dependent on, I guess, what the expectation of how the US is going to perform. And going back to what you mentioned there earlier about they're going to try and outgrow their debt, it's a question on confidence in the US and do the US have a bright future or not. And obviously Donald Trump is talking up a lot the US case, and he's talking about prosperity and the golden age, I believe is what he refers to. And of course, there was the big military show there a few weeks ago they had in Washington to celebrate 250 years of US military. And I believe as well for some event coming up, or maybe it's already even passed, it was at Independence Day or something else coming up, they were going to have some big pageantry on the White House lawn with the UFC fighting championship cage. And like there's a lot of pageantry here to sell the case that America is into the golden era, because they need that confidence, and they need the people to believe that things are going upwards, not downwards here. I guess that's a lot of what he's trading on, and a lot of talking up the book, which is what he's quite good at. I know there is a lot of also talks about technological innovation, and Elon Musk was driving a lot of that in terms of the talks about space exploration and going to Mars and so on. But then there is a large amount of investment in AI stuff from Japan. I saw, for instance, had a couple, I think it was about 500 billion investment into AI over the next several years, US AI infrastructure, and a few other examples of that as well, where they really are trying to beckon growth and beckon confidence into the US. And then I guess the question remains, will that work or not?
Yeah, it's true. Yes, I have my doubts, as you know, but the push is there for sure. I guess this chart is important too, and it shows the 10-year US rate and the dollar index. And the dollar index is a blue line, and the 10-year is the white line. And it shows you a 5-year period, more or less. And typically they're, very heavily correlated. So normally a rise in the rate would lead to a bid in the dollar index, because you obviously can get a higher rate, so you buy dollars to buy those bonds, right? But since the announcement of tariffs, and we mentioned it in the previous episode, this correlation seems to have broken. And like if I had to pick one chart to talk about, this would be the chart, because I think it's just so important. If this correlation has broken, and it definitely looks like it has broken, then it means that US is showing kind of emerging market dynamics rather than what has been the reality of this correlation historically. So, and in emerging markets, typically these guys would borrow in dollars, right? And if they had problems getting access to dollars for whatever reason, their currency would collapse. So the rates of their bonds would go up because, they have problems. But because the funding is in a different currency, their currencies would go down. So it's clear for someone like me, it's a big deal if this has changed, because this dynamic, this correlation, it underpins so many models and, just general market thinking, like trader thinking. So it's a big deal. If this continues, so like if 10-year stays here, goes up, and dollar keeps falling, then the the hegemony of the dollar is over. It's done. It can be a reserve currency, but it has to be one of many. It can't be just the sole one, right?
We enter into the multipolar world.
Yeah, I think so. It's to me, it's a clear sign of that. We talked about how real rates have decoupled from gold. Remember, in one of our previous talks. So it's kind of in the same in the same ballpark. So very important, and I just wanted to point that out. Okay, emerging market bonds higher again, significantly higher. So again, good news for us. And we'll finish off with your favorites, the Bitcoin and Nasdaq with 3 times leverage. Last time we kind of toyed with the idea that these have decoupled, remember? Well, I think this chart puts it to rest. Bitcoin is at all-time highs. Nasdaq is at all-time highs. If you buy Nasdaq with leverage, you get similar returns. Right.
So we're seeing here that Bitcoin is not necessarily a hedge, that it's trading like a commodity.
Well, it's trading like tech stocks, I would say. Like both commodities, as we have seen with gold and silver and copper, are going up, and so does Bitcoin, but so does Nasdaq, and Nasdaq has got nothing to do with commodities. And if you just look at the relationship, I mean, it's pretty heavily correlated, right? It seems to decouple from time to time, but at the end of the day, just like either Nasdaq catches up with Bitcoin or the other way around. So I wouldn't call it a commodity. It's more like a long duration asset. Again, just to stress this, I'm not against Bitcoin at all. I just think people should realize what it is and be smart about trading it. I have nothing against trading it. But like, I don't see much difference between trading Bitcoin and trading a leveraged Nasdaq, right? So and like again, if it's a risk-off environment, I think Bitcoin goes down, but like gold doesn't. So, it's is it a safe haven? I don't think so.
Not necessarily, yeah.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Okay, and that's it. Overall, again, a few words about how all of this has impacted us. It's been a couple of very positive months for us. So our clients made a lot of money on these moves because everything pretty much went alongside our trades. So yeah, can't complain.
Can't complain. We'll take that. That's good news.
I will complain. I will complain at some point.
Well, we'll always find something to complain about, but for now we won't complain. We'll wrap that part of the discussion up in a nice bow where we're saying we're not complaining. So that's a win.
Yeah, let's try at least.
Let's try. Okay, let's move into the Brics topic and have a little chat about that, because obviously we've mentioned a few times, and in previous podcasts as well, we talked about this multipolar world and the dollar hegemony and US dominance, and how the US are trying to avoid things becoming too split. Obviously, the US dollar is the primary reserve currency for many, many years, and the US are part of G7, and the West has been generally quite prosperous in the post-World War II era. A lot of growth and potentially slowing down now, but we're seeing Brics, which is this counter to the G7 and to Western nations, and they're performing and they're starting to move. And I think there's a bit of anxiety about that in the US. We have a quote here from Donald Trump himself insisting that the Brics wants to destroy the dollar. And I think the quote goes, "If we lose the dollar's status as a world currency, it will be like losing a war, a big world war." And you can imagine when I'm saying this, by the way, I'm doing the Donald Trump accordion hands where it's going in and out. I'm doing that right now, you just can't see it. He continues, "We will not let that happen. There is a saying, the dollar is king." And the hands going in and out, of course, again. The dollar is indeed king, and we are going to keep it that way. If anyone wants to challenge that, they can, but they will have to pay a high price for it. And I don't think any of them are willing to pay that price. So there you go. There's this fear of what's happening with Brics. So maybe, Paul, you could just explain to us what exactly is Brics.
Well, I'm not so sure myself because it seems to be evolving. Kind of. So it's definitely a political construct. I don't think it's a military alliance, although the last meeting was just on the back of the 12-day war. So, you could read into statements from Iran that they would like it to be a military alliance, but it's not an official one anyway. I think they have arrangements between each other, like certain countries, they would buy each other's military equipment or whatever, but there's nothing like a NATO type of what is it, Article 5, that you have to defend each other or whatever. So it's not strictly a military alliance. It's not even a formal economic alliance in terms of trade, etc. A bit like G7, I guess. But G7 is more of a military alliance in my eyes because, with the exception of Japan, all G7 countries are NATO countries. I'm pretty sure Japan would be on NATO's side in any conflict anyway. Brics are not like that. They have their own agreements between each other, but not official, not an official military alliance. So political. The term itself was originally coined by a Goldman guy called Jim O'Neill in 2001. And like you said in the beginning, it was created to designate key countries in the emerging markets space at the time, using their capital letters. Jim O'Neill is a smart guy. I actually went to see him speak in London at one point. So it was just a way for Goldman to kind of come up with a basket of these top EM currencies, because in 2001 it was all the rage. Russian stock markets went on to deliver abnormal results. It was a place to be, basically, in terms of your capital. But the point is, this concept is not new at all. It's at least 25 years old, so it's not like it happened yesterday. It's been a long road. The first summit in Russia that could be attributed to what it is called today and what it is today can be traced back to 2009. So a significant formation period.
Yeah, it's not a reactionary organization. It's established.
It's not. It keeps developing. They keep meeting. They just had a meeting in Brazil. Again, it's pretty hard to track it because they keep changing the formats. But I think today we're looking at 10 core members, which is referred to as Brics Plus. So original Brics plus Egypt, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Iran, and UAE. Saudi Arabia has been invited, but they have not formally accepted or rejected the invitation. And then a concept of a BRICS partner country has been introduced recently, which is also comprised of 10 countries. And I guess most notable are Nigeria, Kazakhstan, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, because of their geographical proximity to China and ties with China. We could look at the map straight away. And you can see the BRICS countries in red and member countries in green and partner countries in blue. So just by looking at the map, it's pretty obvious that this whole block is kind of interconnected either by sea or by land borders. And if you think about logistics and trade, obviously the key choke points for sea logistics would be the Red Sea, the Hormuz Strait, and the Panama Canal, right? So, and it kind of looks as though these are the aims of BRICS in terms of logistics and how trade is being done. So avoiding these choke points, and in this stance, Ethiopia makes a lot of sense because it's to the south of the Red Sea, right? And Egypt makes sense because the Suez Canal up in the north.
So there's a strategic element to it as well. It's not just arbitrary.
Exactly, because Ethiopia and Egypt are very poor countries relative to, say, China or Russia or India. They are, especially Ethiopia, I would say. So it's like, if you don't look at the map, it doesn't really make sense. And but if you look at the map, it makes a lot of sense because it's all about, free trade and the way that these ships can pass through these very, very narrow choke points. So I think that, like, it's my idea. I guess it's not official, but it's really difficult to avoid thinking that, right? And like, if you look at South America, one of the things that that was agreed in the last meeting in Brazil was the development of what they call a transoceanic railway going from Peru to Brazil. And basically China is going to help build it. It kind of neutralizes the Panama Canal, if you think about it, because Panama Canal is notoriously difficult to pass through, right? It's very narrow. You have to pay all these fees. It's not really efficient. And it's also a very problematic geographical point, I would say, given its history. Even today, there's arguments between Chinese companies and U.S. Advances, right, in terms of who controls the ports of Panama. It's another way to avoid dealing with U.S. in trade.
So a lot of it is there is a lot of strategic elements going on with
Yeah.
Brics. It's not just a conceptual naming or categorization of emerging market countries or poorer nations. There is actually a plan in terms of, I guess, infrastructure and trade anyway, that you can notice if you look at it close enough.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say?
Very fair. I think it's all about trade, how you trade, how you get the goods where they're needed, how you pay for those goods, what kinds of systems you use to pay for those, what is the collateral. It's like, if you count all these countries, it's a lot of economic power.
Like how much? Like, would you have an estimation of how large or how much it accounts for?
It depends how you count. Because if you talk about GDP, there are different ways to measure GDP, and different countries have different assumptions about inflation and how inflation is calculated and how GDP is calculated. But if you use PPP approach, it's probably around 40% of global GDP. It's about 50% of global GDP growth in the past few years.
And then if you were to compare that to let's say the Western equivalent, the G7, what's that look like?
In PPP terms, I think G7 is less than 30%. So it's probably bigger than G7 at this point. Most of it is coming from China and India, most of the growth, but not just. So Indonesia is quite big. Russia is doing well economically despite the war. So it's quite a big economic constellation if you think about it. It's also probably around half of world population in head count, primarily because of India and China, but still. So Colombia and Uzbekistan have officially become new member countries of the BRICS New Development Bank. And I think it will be the conduit, something like a World Bank kind of thing for doing trades. And look, obviously, this bank is not going to facilitate trades using SWIFT, I don't think, because SWIFT has been compromised because of the Ukraine-Russia war. Russian banks have been kicked off SWIFT. And all that. So it seems like they're building their own payment / custody / trading / logistics system. That's what it feels like to me. And it's pretty hard to ignore, right? I mean, it's right in your face. And with Trump admitting that he's, like, for me, his words are an admission of fear. Because, like, if you didn't care, why would you even say it? And the reaction, the 50% tariffs on Brazil. Brazil is funny, especially because it's one country that US had a surplus with, like a trade surplus with. So not for long, I can tell you, because of that. It seems to be just ideological. It isn't like the Trump's reaction. It's just, oh, you're bad, you want to trade in a different way, so I'll put tariffs on you and I'll force you into trading in the way we used to. But it's just not going to happen, is it?
Well, this is again more of, I guess, the concept that we were putting forward earlier, where the US dollar and the US were the hegemony and the unipolar world for a long time, and they're fearing this change into a multipolar world. I know myself, when I listen to most discussions on this in different podcasts, there's a lot of discussion about how, and we even covered it the last time we were talking about this, how a lot of US industry has moved out of the US and is now based in the East, and China has the basis for production, and then there's a lot of other countries similarly which exploit a lot of cheap labor as well, but you can't deny that they hold a lot of the power in terms of growth, and the fear is in the US that they're losing that's where they're falling off. And obviously Trump has been talking as well about returning steel industry back to the US, because a lot of boat production and similar industry related to steel is gone, and they want to bring that back. So yeah, I think fear probably describes it, or they're definitely trying to stave off this post-West perspective.
Yeah, I would also mention the heavy reliance on commodities in these countries. So all of them are very big commodity producers, and some of these commodities are critical. There's still some debate of whether Saudi Arabia is in BRICS or not. But if you think Russia, heavy commodity producer, Brazil, very heavy, pretty much in everything. China controls the rare earths. Kazakhstan is uranium. So they seem to have a grip on very critical minerals that are absolutely essential for economic growth globally.
I think there's a strategic element to that exact topic from a US perspective. And I don't know what you think of this, Paul, but I know myself, I've been watching where Trump has been going and what he's been doing in terms of meeting different countries, and he spent some time recently in Saudi Arabia. They seem to love him there. They had a big festival for him, and he was up on the stage doing the YMCA, and all the various Saudi entities were doing the same, which was kind of surreal to see, but they seem to really like him. So he was spending a lot of time there in Saudi Arabia and coming up with different trade agreements and ideas there, and then he's spending a lot of time in Japan, and as well as that, he's been spending a lot of time in South America. Obviously, he's been meeting the Ecuadorian president, meeting them, and then he's obviously as well, he's a big fan of Javier Milei in Argentina. So I've been wondering, is there a little bit of a pivot away from Europe, from the US perspective, and are they trying to set up some kind of agreement with these other countries? And as well as that, worth mentioning, because India is part of Brics, but they've spent a lot of time talking with India, and I know even JD Vance and his family were out in India recently, and they were coming to different trade agreements. I know they wanted to move Apple out of China and move it into India so that most of the production would happen there. Again, this pivot away from China, this fear of China. So there seems to be a bit of strategic movement there as well from a US perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So each case is special. The ones you mentioned, like the relationship of US and Japan, and US and Saudi Arabia, and US and India, they're very different in their nature and very special. Each case can be discussed for hours, right? Argentina as well. And Argentina is one country that rejected BRICS. I think it's the only country that rejected the Brics invitation, and it happened only after Milei was elected. Right, so he's a big partner. Like, and as an individual, he's a big partner of U.S. generally. Like, he had the biggest bailout in Argentinian history in terms of size. The IMF provided this loan, and IMF is pretty much U.S. In terms of who finances it. I think every country in BRICS has its own set of wants and needs. All of them are big enough to play their own game and to have their own priorities. I think India especially, because they're just so big and there is some envy, I guess, towards China. So yeah, you could see some fracture there, but at the same time, India was a big economic partner of Russia when they needed them most. So a lot of oil was sold to India. So they kind of look after themselves mainly, I would say. And geopolitics and strategy in that sense comes secondary. Japan has been a long-term ally of US. It's probably their biggest ally in the Asia. I would say they are misbehaving, so they clearly want Japanese capital to return home, and they're refusing to accept this rhetoric that they have to buy more treasuries or buy military equipment from US, which is unheard of for Japanese, really. So different there. Saudi Arabia is a special place, but again, their biggest trading partner is China today. China is buying more oil than US today. So for Saudi Arabia, they just want to trade with everyone, I think. So their best scenario is just to trade with both US and China in a beneficial way. That's the dream, and develop their country. But obviously, they also have a very strict USD Saudi Riyal peg. It's a fixed peg that it's been there for, I don't know, maybe 40 years, 50 years, something like that. So they kind of use the dollar in their own trade. And if the dollar goes down, so does Riyal. And Saudi Arabia is kind of dependent on imports. They have to import a lot of stuff. And if the Riyal goes down, they can buy less stuff. At the same time, when the oil is kind of low in comparison to gold, say. So a bit tricky. And I have to wonder, is this all a show? You mentioned this nice visit of Trump's. Maybe they're just playing to their strengths. Maybe they understand Trump. Maybe they're just making him feel good. I would do that, for instance.
Yeah, that's certainly a good strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. But Argentina is an interesting one because they're clearly aligned with the U.S. and they have rejected BRICS for whatever reason, right? And I think it will be a very interesting example going forward, whether they will succeed, whether Milei's reforms succeed or not, whether the BRICS guys do better.
It's like an ideological battle in some ways, because you look at BRICS, there's a lot of, I guess you'd call them despotic regimes, quite dominated, and quite a lot of centralized power in these regimes. Whereas when you look at Argentina, for anyone that doesn't know, Javier Milei, I guess you'd call him a decentralization man. He's an economist, but he's all about libertarian and free market principles, and he's been trying to turn Argentina into that, an environment where market is free trade, and he's been trying to decentralize a lot of institutions in Argentina and decrease the size of government and so on. It's definitely more married to to Western ideals than it is to perhaps some of these BRICS nations. So it is an interesting contrast when you compare that ideological battle between the two, BRICS and Argentina.
Yeah, I'm not sure about despotic.
Yeah.
We are in Europe after all, Cormac. So
Okay, that's a different discussion entirely.
it's a fine line. That's my point, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to differentiate. But I would agree that most of these BRICS nations are kind of centrally planned, and it's like a centrally planned economy type of approach. Milei, yes, he's going for this shock therapy kind of thing. And, you know, for me, Argentina, I have a sweet spot for Argentina. I've never been to the place, but we've been investing in Argentina for a long, long time. And we've traded a lot of Argentinian assets like, you know, government bonds, corporate bonds, stocks. We always traded the dollar denominations, so we never actually dabbled into Argentinian peso. So I think I can speak from experience, you know, and Argentina is a serial defaulter on its debt. I think it's like 9 times, you know, with the latest default being in 2020, so literally 5 years ago. And 3 of these defaults came in the last 2 decades. So 2001, 2014, and 2020. And they have been running this American-based approach. IMF was always bailing them out. So I'm not sure how doing the same thing solves the problems, right? I'm not sure how it works. But anyway, we have been investing. And I have to say, Milei was very good for us as investors, as foreign investors, because, you know, we've been buying government bonds of Argentina down to maybe 30 cents on the dollar. They're at 75, 78 now. The equities had a massive rally. Some of the corporate bonds with links to government have, you know, had a massive run-up. We're out of it now. We sold everything now, just because I have my doubts about his policies and how it's going to work if the rest, like especially if Brazil continues on this path. I think it will be very difficult for Argentina to keep up. So we sold everything. Maybe it was a mistake, I don't know, but we made good money on it. And I think that's the point. His policies benefited foreign investors a lot, especially those not being in the local currency, which has collapsed and is still collapsing, by the way. I think we have a chart on that. It's a disgusting chart. It went from 100 in 2021 to 1,260 now. So that's crazy. Just imagine getting paid in local currency. I mean, it's a disaster if you think about it.
Yeah, I think you and I probably split in terms of our perspectives on this one, Paul, because I know I've one friend recently, and I've read plenty of anecdotes about Argentina. Again, like you, I've never been there, but I had one friend who visited Argentina, and he confirmed from what I was reading was correct, that, for instance, on the streets before even Milei came to prominence or power, you couldn't buy fruit on the street because of inflation. So you'd go onto the street to try and buy a bunnet of strawberries or blueberries or something, and you'd be unable to buy them because the prices were so high. So I don't personally, from what I understand, I don't think it was exactly a very successfully operating economy for Argentinians.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think
it still isn't.
It still isn't. That is the point, that it still isn't. I guess one thing that I find quite interesting, and I think you probably relate to this because of your background living in Latvia and having grown up in post-USSR Latvia, there's an interesting phenomenon or system, I guess you'd call it, maybe. The IMF you called it a shock therapy plan. And I know they did the same in Poland post-USSR. and it was by the then Prime Minister, I think it was his name was Bolsherovich, and it was the same shock therapy, and it was devaluing the currency and trying to decentralize government and so on, and establish these various economic systems. And it took several years to actually take ground or grow or to become implemented. But now I think recently I was reading some stat that I think Poland is in the top 20 in terms of GDP, I think worldwide now, or some stat like that recently. So they're tending to do quite well, and I know across Europe they're regarded as quite good performers. So I guess when you look at it as a short term in Argentina, where they're trying to implement similar things to the Bolsherovich plan in Poland, I think there's like an inevitability to how it won't sort itself out in the short term, and there's going to be a lot of clever people like yourself trading and making good money on the situation there. But maybe in the long term there might be a lot of payoff for what they're trying to do. I know, for instance, he's cut a load of government departments and decentralized from that angle, and I know they've defunded the national airline, which had some crazy payments to CEOs and to so on. It was just pure waste. And then what else? He got rid of rent caps as well, and I think that doubled the availability of apartments and houses in Buenos Aires. And there's various other things like that, which personally I guess I'm on board with. Anything away from socialism is a good thing in my mind. Not democratic socialism, but just general socialism.
I agree.
Yeah.
I generally agree. We're not that far apart. But one thing is cutting waste. That's one thing. And I approve that. I approve of that completely everywhere. In Latvia as well. In Ireland. I would love to see it in Ireland.
Oh, stop that.
We're not going to get into that. We'll have a separate topic for that, separate episode. But, it seems I do approve of the move from like these weird socialist policies to more capitalist kind of free market rule. Let's cut out the waste type of policies. But I still believe that it's kind of the same approach as before, but with somewhat different characteristics, right? So you're still borrowing from the outside, being, IMF being the main sponsor of this. IMF is very political. It's very geopolitical, at least today. Maybe not before, but today for sure. You're still devaluing your currency. You still have not solved the poverty rates, the inflation rate. It seems that the trade-off was, giving gold reserves, sending somewhere, nobody knows where. The Argentinian government admitted that the gold reserves have been moved to a third country. They don't tell us in which quantities and where, but they admitted that it's gone. So I have to wonder if this was the payoff for the IMF loan in the end. That is kind of hush-hush. And that's the gist of it, right? You give money to these countries, but you take their resources. So I'm wondering if it's more of the same. I hope not. I want the country to succeed, but I just can't see how it succeeds with these policies. I think it will be very, very hard politically because you're making life worse for your citizens and better for investors. And I guess you need the capital of investors, but it's a fine line. You need to balance, You have to make both kind of happy. And the way it looks now, it just makes guys like me happy, but not the local people. And it's a political problem, right? Because I think the election is not that far out. So we'll see. Supposedly there is support if you look at the articles, but then again, you know about polling more than me. These numbers can be easily manipulated, and
Yeah, that's always true. I guess that's that's one to keep an eye on. Just for reference on that, there was some poll that came out recently in Argentina, and it's reported in one of their national newspapers that something like 74% of citizens polled said they would prefer, or they would vote for continuing the current course in Argentina in the election in October, while only 27% expressed an intention to change what they're doing. So I guess it is one to watch. Is that accurate or not, or are people able to suffer the short-term pains currently that they're experiencing, or are they happy to move beyond the longer-term pain that they had experienced for a long time? That's a societal question, I guess.
Yeah, it's like 74% with inflation at 56%. Sounds, I mean, it has, for someone like me, given my background, it has a bit of a Soviet vibe about it, you know.
Right.
I'm not sure these numbers are right, but we'll see, right? The election,
Yeah.
as you said, it's October, so we'll see what's happening.
October, yeah. But I think that's one to just keep an eye on, because as we said, it is an ideological bellwether, I guess, or you could definitely compare it to the Brics Union, and it's going to just be really interesting to see the long-term outcomes in Argentina compared to some of these Brics nations and how they're going to do.
We should definitely keep an eye on Argentina and get back to it. It's a nice way to look at the progress of both systems. I think the reason why Argentina was supported by the US so much, for instance, the IMF loan was like easy. Typically, it used to be all these negotiations, it took months. Milei just got it. We still don't know what he traded for it, but he got it easy. And I think the idea is to make it a case of success, So we'll see if it works. I'm keeping my eye on it for sure, for practical reasons and for money-making reasons. But like I said, we're out of it now. We made our money, and we'll see what happens next.
Okay, so why don't we pivot back to Brics as our primary topic, and how things are shaping up from that perspective. In particular, I know you have perspectives on oil and gold for Brics and how they're going to play out. What do you think?
Yeah, we could just touch on it briefly. I think it's self-evident that these are important. For instance, there's been constant talk about the Brics currency being developed and some tie-in to gold in that currency. I'm not sure if it's even needed. I'm pretty sure gold is used as a neutral reserve in the Brics trading already. For instance, there's been a lot of kind of market information talking about how countries are buying gold but reporting less or not reporting it at all, especially Saudi Arabia, by the way. So gold seems to be the currency of Brics, and oil seems to be the major commodity, and it is a major commodity. It's just so much bigger. And, even to trade it, you need a currency big enough. And US dollar was always big enough. It's very important in terms of how these trade off each other. So the ratio between, like, how many barrels of oil can you buy for an ounce of gold kind of thing. And right now, it's kind of misallocated, I would say. You can buy a lot of oil with not a lot of gold, and historically it's a rarity. So yeah, I think it's all about resources, it's all about development, it's all about trade, and yeah, gold and oil seem to be critical parts of this system. I think Brics kind of relates to China's Silk Road initiative as well. And again, we've talked about the infrastructural project in Brazil and Peru. So that's kind of in the vein of it. We come, we invest, we develop something, we employ local companies to do it, everyone benefits type of thing. And it's very different from a US style approach, you do it our way or we, start a regime change operation or something like this. So very, very different. But oil, gold, trade, development, and as a consequence, security, key reasons for BRICS even being a thing, I think. So I'm not sure I've answered, but it's I think it's right there for everyone to see. And oil, and you have to understand another thing about oil, it's not just energy, it's also plastics. And sea trade routes are super important, and we've looked at the map, and it's clear that it's all about oil being traded in a kind of easy way and transparent way. One of the things that US always promised was the security of trade, meaning the security of sea routes. And what we see now is anything but security. I think we've had 3 tankers being blown and sunk in the past couple of weeks by Houthis. And okay, Yemen is not part of BRICS, but the links are obvious. And again, if you come back to the commodity nature of these countries, they dominate in oil, platinum, palladium, uranium, rare earths, arguably in agriculture. It's no wonder Trump is kind of pissed off about BRICS meeting in Brazil.
Yeah, well, that's what I was exactly going to say. It actually kind of frames it perfectly that, you're looking at this entity which is growing legs and is spreading. I'm not going to say spreading tendrils because that gives bad connotations, but it's certainly growing outwards. And you're looking at the established entity, which we've mentioned many times, the Western entities and post World War II USA and Europe, which is a whole other discussion, but in my opinion, quite stagnant. That we shall have. But you look at these entities that are protecting themselves and are protecting their history and what they have been, and then you look at this large beast which seemingly is trying to organize, come together and push out, and it sets the perfect stage for no real surprise for why Donald Trump and why the US admin are trying to talk up the case and even talk into existence a new golden age in the US, because they kind of need to, because they're afraid of this growth of this other block. So it's certainly very interesting from that perspective, and I think that it's one that people should be aware of, because even in Europe and in Ireland, I know how many people per day are going to think about BRICS and think about these large growing entities in the East and all around the world. They're not going to think about it too much, because you live in general comfort and you live in general prosperity, so you're not too worried about it. But eventually all things fade if you don't look after them.
I think you have to be aware of this. Whatever conclusions you make, you have to be aware that this is happening, and it's not just like words or abbreviations.
Yeah.
These are actual people, and they come together and they make agreements like this railroad across South America. I mean, it's right there, and it's been going on for a while, as we've mentioned. It's not necessarily a bad thing, I would say. It probably the world needs some balance to operate efficiently. I'm not sure Trump's approach is workable. I don't think infuriating these guys works. Coming together and making agreements works with them. And they would be very open to that, unlike US today. And I believe that in the end, that's where we'll end up. It's just a matter of how long it will take to adjust to it. But things are accelerating, and I think we're about to witness what's going to happen. So I think it's important to keep track of this, and I think we should return to this topic in maybe 6 months or 12 months or something like
Absolutely, that. Yeah. So then maybe just even to head towards a closing note in this discussion, what do you think is next for this entity?
I think they'll just keep growing. I think it's very important what Saudi Arabia is up to. Are they going to be a member? Are they going to get rid of the FX bag? They're very, very influential. It doesn't really make sense for UAE to be in BRICS and Saudis not to be in BRICS, because they're very similar. They're very close. I think that will be critical. Brazil and China just signed a memorandum with the rail corridor thing, as I mentioned. The bank, the MBD bank, it's obviously going to be developing as well. So I don't really think that any type of tariff enforcement or coercion or, regime change type of approach will change anything. I think they'll just keep going at it. I don't see why they would do otherwise.
Yeah, okay, so there's an awful lot going on, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on, considering what's going on in US politics and how Western focused we are, and everyone probably listening to this is as well. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on what's going on with BRICS and the BRICS nations, because they're moving a lot faster than anything we're doing in the West, really. So it's definitely something to observe and to not take the eye off of, because when you forget about your competition, then they'll overtake you. So that's a really interesting topic to talk about, and I think that kind of neatly closes it up. I think we've gotten to the point where we've covered the topic and have a pretty broad, good understanding of what's going on with BRICS. So yeah, what do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think we have to watch it for a while and see where it ends up. And yeah, I think we've talked a lot this time, but it's a broad topic, so I'm sure people who are listening will excuse us.
You could have left out the this time at the end of I think we've talked a lot, and I think it would have been just as accurate.
We just like talking, right?
I think that's just an inevitability at this stage, really. We're not going to fool anyone but ourselves when we say this time.
Yeah, I guess we have to be honest with ourselves too.
For sure. Okay, I think that's worth leaving it there, Paul. That was a really interesting topic and conversation, and I'm looking forward to our next one, whatever it may be.
I think it should be on Europe. It sounds about right to talk about ourselves at this point.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. And then so next time we're probably going to talk about Europe.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Thanks for doing this, and anyone listening, thanks for listening. If you have any thoughts or commentary or questions, we'll be happy to look into them and, talk about these things in the next episode.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, Paul. Take care now.
Bye-bye.